and name it, every federal and state agency investigating Tinubu, keeping their record, right, have been told to release them. David Hundeyin, right, the guy who instituted the case, the FOIA case against the US agencies like the FBI, the DIA, the NDLEA, the name it. So they got this victory that somehow Tinubu and his handlers have been trying to tell everybody that it's nothing new. Now, David was on Nigeria Info, a Nigeria radio platform, right, as a guest, where he explained what this judgment means. He's involved. So he's the best person to tell us what this means, right? Before now, they redacted the name of Tinubu from the document released by the FBI. And that took away the authenticity or originality of those documents. With this new one, they would have to print Tinubu's name, his associates, in clearly written letter, like a word for everybody to see. Here is David, by the way.
An IRS special agent called Kevin Moss was in charge of that leg of the investigation. Now, the reason the IRS was involved in an investigation about drugs is that part of the purview of the IRS is money laundering. And as you know, drugs and money laundering go hand in hand. So that part of the investigation focused on the fact that $1.8 million worth of proceeds of heroin trafficking was found in accounts that belonged to a fellow by the name of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So that was the IRS leg of the investigation. So it was basically what you would call an indictment that basically drew a straight line that this is where these funds originated from. This is the heroin distribution organization. These are the main characters. So a guy by the name of Moise Akonde and his accomplices, Leandro Edwards, and the other guy, Agbele, who later became a political operator under Irish in the States. And these are the main characters in this heroin trafficking operation. This is the account that these monies were deposited into. And then these are the relationships between these heroin traffickers and the people who control these accounts. So Bola Tinubu was identified. Bola Tinubu's wife, Remi Tinubu, was also identified as someone who ran a joint account with a wife of one of these heroin traffickers. And Leandro Edwards, who was sort of the African-American sort of spearhead of the gang, the sort of retail end of the gang, he actually ended up dying in prison in the year 2004. The investigation was actually primarily about him, but it dragged in all these other people. So the story that I published in 2022 focused on that, as well as some other financial misdemeanors and potential money laundering, potential instances of money laundering that I was able to dig up with my own research. Now, after publishing that story, there's a guy called Aaron Greenspan. He's the founder of a website called plainsight.org. Now, Plainsight is a website that deals primarily with legal disclosure. So the goal of Plainsight is that things that should be on public record should be publicly available and readily so. So U.S. federal case records, as quickly as they can be obtained from PACER, which is the U.S. Government database, they're posted on Plainsight. So the Plainsight section regarding Bola Tinubu started receiving a lot of traffic after I published that story. And the owner of Plainsight realized that my story was where this traffic was coming from. So he reached out to me. And we came up with a collaboration, an idea for collaboration that, okay, now this story was based primarily on an IRS investigation. Now it was a federal drug investigation. So definitely the FBI and the DEA would also have been involved, because that's how federal investigations work. You have different government agencies collaborating on a single investigation. So we're going to get the records of the FBI and the DEA by sending in a Freedom of Information request. So that was done in, I believe that was November 2022, the first time we sent out an FOIA to these government agencies. This FOIA was turned down, it was denied, and the exemptions that were claimed to justify turning down the FOIA cited individual privacy concerns, privacy exemptions, as well as national security exemptions, whatever that might mean. So we appealed. I believe this was in March 2023. We appealed the refusal of the FOIAs. The appeal was turned down. So then we took it to court, which is the last option that you have. You can actually sue government agencies in the US for turning down your FOIA request, and then a judge has to hear the case. Now, normally what would happen is if you're taking it to court, you have to pay for a lawyer, and it's a very expensive process. But because Aaron has a lot of expertise in FOIA litigation specifically, even though he's not a lawyer, because he has done this for so many years. So having him was as good as having a lawyer. So we were actually able to go through this without spending, stupid money on a lawyer. So all I ended up spending money on was like filing costs for the lawsuit. So $80 here, $400 there, which is not to say that it was cheap, but it was a lot less expensive than it would have been for me if I had to pay for a US lawyer. So from May 2023 onwards, which was when the case kicked off in earnest, Aaron and I have been working. So Aaron's name appears on the case file. So it's Greenspan versus EU, USA, FBI, CIA, like that. My name doesn't appear on the case because obviously he's a US citizen and a US resident. So it was more expedient for his name to appear on the document. So we've been doing this jointly since 2023. In September 2023, we then got something called a joint status report from these 6 government agencies. And they said that, okay, we're going to release these files. The FBI specifically said we're going to release the files that we have identified as relevant to your request. And we've identified 2,500 pages. So they first identified over 70,000 pages, but then we requested that they shrink down the number of pages to the most relevant ones, to pages that had specifically to do with Bola Tinubu, with Moise Adegboyega, with Remi Tinubu, with Chief K.O. Tinubu, and with other members of the Tinubu family, and things relating to the heroin distribution case specifically. So that number shrank down to 2,500. So we were then told that these 2,500 pages of documents will be released at the rate of about 500 a month over 5 months. And that the release will start from the end of October 2023, which actually did happen. However, instead of getting 500 pages every month, it was closer to about 300. So in every release, at least 200 pages were basically missing, were basically redacted. There was no mention whatsoever of Tinubu's name specifically in the pages that were released to the public. All mention of his name was removed. So those were the redactions. So by February 2024, when the release of those files ended, we then filed an appeal. And the appeal was specifically regarding the reductions, that we wanted the reductions taken out. So as not to waste our time and everybody's time, we then asked for something called a summary judgment. Now, what a summary judgment is that the judge, instead of watching all of us go back and forth, making arguments back and forth, which can take years, the judge makes a final decision. The judge examines the merits of both arguments and makes a final decision that should these reductions be lifted or not.
Okay.
Are these exemptions valid or not? Right. So the arguments that the DEA and the FBI made in the court filings were that the exemptions are valid because even though Bola Tinubu is a public official and Nigerians have a right to know what their public officials, that Nigerians have a right to know what their government is up to, but that doesn't extend to knowing what specific public officials might have been up to, which I thought was an incredible argument to make, because certainly you wouldn't make that argument if it was an American public official, but I guess Black lives really don't matter to some people apparently. So obviously we pushed back on that, and we've been going back and forth since I think November last year. So it was Tuesday last week that the judge, Beryl Howell, delivered this ruling, a summary judgment, and the summary judgment was that the reasons being given for these exemptions are completely nonsensical, that they make no sense, that these exemptions are not valid. So basically, the rationale behind these reductions has mixed. So they have to go back and produce those documents again, and this time using the knowledge that those exemptions are not valid. So basically, all the missing pages have to be put in this time around. So the same files are going to be released, but with those missing pages this time around. The pages that make mention of Tinubu's name. So that's what the judgment is.
I'm curious.
I don't know if some of you remember though that they had to redact the one they released in October last year, and it became pure useless. You know, initially it was like you could read it by just whenever you see that black cover, just put Tinubu's name there. And if the reading is talking about more than one person, put his wife as well. Well, now we can have a permanent record of Tinubu in this regard, and based on the request explained. Yesterday I did something or I did push out a rhetorical question by saying, you know what is going to happen next? So what does it even mean, right? So, and then I said as well that the institutions that are supposed to have possibly saved Nigeria from this disgrace, this international disgrace, right? Where a druggie, but Escobar, what's that his name again? Is that Escobar? Yeah, Pablo Escobar, right? He himself also attempted to be president of his country. A drug lord, though. That was where his own country, known for narcotic and all that, had to say, oh, no, we can't let that happen. But in Nigeria, a drug lord is their president. Institutions that are supposed to protect Nigeria, save you, they're compromised. In fact, they have been dancing, twerking for this same call, you know. But David believed that when Nigerians are ready, like people say that though, like when Nigerians are ready, they will demand us. He believes same too.
The judicial system in Nigeria, again, as a journalist, I'm sure that you know and have seen and have heard all that's been happening. Before now, you and I would say that the Nigerian judiciary would be the last hope of the common person. And if we are looking at this redacted files, when it does come out and we all have the copies in our hands and whatever we make of it, do you think that if someone decides that they're going to sue Mr. President on whatever grounds, and I don't know what it would be for anyone who wants to, do you think that it would fly?
Again, I think that whether it flies or not depends on the mood of Nigerians.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that, David? When you say the mood of what exactly?
What I mean by that is that even the outcome of the supposed election tribunals in 2023, whether people realize it or not, was determined in large part by the fact that by choosing to not react, Nigerians in fact reacted a certain way, and that was interpreted as, open season. It's fine to do whatever you want. If the judiciary feels sufficiently feels sufficient political pressure from the streets, from everyday Nigerians, if the people in the judiciary feel like their drivers and their cooks and their maids and their gatemen are not going to be happy with them when they go home, if they if they don't do the right thing, then they will fix up. But the sort of that learned apathy that Nigerians have, that learned helplessness, that socially engineered idea that you can't do anything, you have no agency, and that you're just a victim, that is what is responsible for the judiciary seemingly getting away with absolute murder. So I feel like this isn't going to be any different. I feel like even if someone I follow on social media said this very brilliantly the other day. He said, if this person, who shall remain unnamed, if a video emerges of this person smoking like crack cocaine and shooting somebody dead on tape, it's not really going to change much in the minds of certainly his base, because his base does not support him for rational reasons. And that the rest of the population is going to look at the reaction of his base and then decide that, well, we can't do anything. Since they are not doing anything, then we too can't do anything about it. That's the tragedy, I think. This thing is called the tragedy of commons, where everybody feels like it's somebody else's job to respond or to react in a certain way. And since they didn't do it, well, then I don't have any responsibility either.
Let me put you on the spot, David, as a Nigerian. What do you think is responsible for that mindset? The
tragedy of a common man in a place where everybody knows everything is wrong, but they are expecting somebody else to do something. And they will jump at you. What are you doing? What are you doing to save the people? What? Instead of you to go and do, everybody is saying you. What are you doing? You, like that. What are you doing? What are you doing? You're not doing anything. Instead of you to start up, instead of everybody, like, this is tragedy, isn't it? And they know that you won't do anything. That in itself, right, is also a response, like David put it, right? You see, when they rigged the election, they expected some reactions, like everybody hit the street. That didn't happen. So the reaction was that nobody cares. So we could go on and do even worse. And that's exactly what you are experiencing. And they will still do worse. You know? I mean, a man that they said is a public appointee, right? I want to check his title, right? So they said there's a guy called Ajayi Bayo, okay? And they said that he's representing Ekiti, okay, on the board of Environmental Protection Agency, representing Ekiti. And just this afternoon, his media people said he had just opened a charging port for the people of his constituency as an empowerment. I don't know how to react to this, right? Well, that is the standard, you know, like, I don't know how to react to, but this is the standard in which people are being treated. And the people that you might feel concerned for how they are being poorly treated appear to be happy. So you can't really explain it. In Ekiti, a newly built charging center by one of their politicians.
Agenda 2022, it is done. Báwo jàre? Báwo jọ? Ẹ ṣe wo ẹni lọ ní? It's a pleasure to meet you here. And this is about agenda in the chapter. Agenda 2022, Game Center. Anyway, what we are especially launching today is the charging. Actually, the purpose of this is that for some time now there's no light in the day. I think almost 3 or 4 months now. And I learned that our people are having issue with light. Yes. For this period, we thank God the state government is attending to the light issue. But between now and then, and to at least relieve our people of the stress, I have to add this charging point to be built out as area of this lane. The purpose is for people to be charging. So our people can come here. We'll be running tonight 24 hours for our people to charge their phone. And for now, not like what I said, I showed them to see free of charge. Agenda 2023 information for that maybe we are doing it to make money. No. This is part of what we are doing to support the government. This is part of what we are doing to identify with our people. I believe in politics of identification with the people at different levels, at the grassroots level, at the middle level, at the higher level. Then for my people at home, we have to help them at this moment. Just for them to have a place to be charging their phone. Like what I said once more, the free these people will be running 247. And by God's grace, we have already employed 2 people here, that the manager, that is receptionist, that will be paying shopping salary every month. So by God's grace, we are doing this one to support the government. And I believe in God by God's grace. Báwo agenda 2026 it is done. Thank you, sir. God bless you, sir. Thank you, sir. God bless you, sir.
Do you see the people that you have the same right with to decide who is more qualified, right, to represent you in the public